Hello, I'm Matt. Welcome to Unbearable 73. In this video, we'll be discussing news and rumors of Dune Part 2 and my thoughts on them. So I have some articles on the screen which you should be able to see. Yep, you can see them. So Dune wins big at the Visual Effects Society Awards. Dune Part 1 won 4 awards. Outstanding Visual Effects in a Photoreal Feature. Outstanding Model in a Photoreal Animated Project for the Role Ornithopter, which is this thing. Pretty cool looking, if I do say so myself. Great work by the Dune SFX guys. Outstanding effects simulation in a photoreal feature for the dunes of Arrakis, basically the landscape. And outstanding compositing lighting in a feature for the attack on Arrakeen, which is the main city on Arrakis where the Harkonnens used to be, that the Atreides took over, and that the attack was where they, so winning the outstanding visual effects in a photoreal feature, it makes it more likely that Dune will be nominated for an Academy Award. Honestly, the Academy Awards have been devalued for reasons the last couple of years. Mostly due to actors being morons and acting like morons and alienating their fans more than anything. Dune was up against Godzilla vs. Kong, The Matrix Resurrections, No Time to Die, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and Spider-Man No Way Home. I think the only real competitor was Godzilla vs. Kong. Not 100% sure what the criteria were. My instinct tells me that the evaluation process has to be the visual effects in the context of effective storytelling. And in that sense, the only competition was Godzilla vs. Kong and Spider-Man No Way Home. There was no real effective storytelling in The Matrix Resurrections or Shang-Chi. Personally, I would agree to Godzilla vs. Kong out of those three because I think the visual elements, the effects, arguably better, but in the context of telling the story, they were more significant, played a bigger part in conveying the story. Whereas in Dune, they could have been less good, and you still would have had a great movie. So now let's go on to some of the casting rumors. So I have another article or 3 here, and we'll go to the top. So you can read through the whole thing. I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts on what they say. Okay. So they mentioned 4 characters, but 3 other significant ones. Feyd Rautha. Feyd Rautha is the other nephew of Baron Harkonnen, not the one we met already, which was played by Batista, which is the Beast Raban. Feyd is his more charismatic heir, so to speak. Also, he's the Baron himself. In his youth, was a very handsome man, and backstory-wise, he looks like what he does with that deformities and disease due to crusting the Bene Gesserits. Okay, and Feyd is kind of like the young Baron. He looks like the young Baron. He has the same charisma the young Baron had. And honestly, the Baron was evil as a young man, but he wasn't as warped as he was now. So, yes, Feyd's important, but he's not the driving. But the driving narrative of Dune is not the competition between Feyd and Paul, which the article seems to want it to be. The driving narrative in Dune is the politics of the imperial court, which dictate the events of the novel and therefore the film. If Paul can be said to have an enemy, a specific enemy, it's Shaddam Carino IV, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Paul's actual opponent in the novel is his reluctance to embrace a role that he inevitably knows will lead to galaxy-wide conflict and the death of billions or trillions. Feyd is just the Baron's tool. They mentioned several candidates for the role, and frankly, they were better off going with the best actor among lesser-known actors, just because it's not a significant enough role that you need to get the best, a legendary actor to play a legendary villain. The legendary villain is not Feyd. I'm going to put it that way. Then they mentioned Princess Irulan, and again, they get their relationship wrong. And I think it's because the actor who plays Paul and the actress who is leading casting for Irulan were together in a previous film and had great on-screen chemistry. Now, Irulan is the oldest daughter of Shaddam Carino IV. Technically, she's his heir, but there is some male primogeniture, I believe the word is for, in Dune, where males are preferred over females for heirs. Frankly, in the context of the novel, if Shaddam had simply had Paul marry Irulan and declared Paul to be his heir, the entire plot of Dune could have been sidestepped in terms of the conflict with the Atreides and the Carino family. So that thing about the novel aside, Irulan, they think that Irulan has to have some sort of on-screen chemistry with Paul. So the actors had that. So maybe no, Irulan and Paul have the opposite of on-screen chemistry. And I'm not going to spoil it for movie-only people, but suffice it to say, they're not close. Now, although it will surprise you to say that Irulan is the historian basically telling you the story of Dune, if you read the novel. If you eventually read the novel. So now we get to the last big character, which is Shaddam Carino IV. And this, to me, is a critical casting of this film. The article mentions several actors, including Mads Mikkelsen, Michael Fassbender, and Benicio del Toro. If you want a model of how Shaddam acts and should be appear on screen, think kind of like Michael Corleone in the Godfather films, particularly in the second and third film where he was less sociopathic and more. He was still the evil overlord, but he had fits of emotion, and you felt his rage a little more as he, so to speak. And Shaddam is like that. He's cold, calculating most of the time, but he has an inner fire, a burn to let people offend him by challenging him, basically. That the world should be a certain way, and it should be Shaddam's way or Michael Corleone's way. I could see Mikkelsen or Del Toro doing that, but Mikkelsen more so than anyone. Because Del Toro is the subdued sort of character type, whereas Mikkelsen can play the almost over the top type of villain. If he were still alive, the actor who played Hans Gruber in The Sheriff of Nottingham, whose name is, who played Hans Gruber and who played Snape, not Michael Winrose. You know what I'm talking about. It just escaped me at the moment. He would be a great Shaddam Carino IV. Yeah. So, you can peruse those articles about the casting of those three characters, and we'll get to the last bit because I want to make this video go on forever. We'll talk about Dune 2 setting, what it might set up afterward. Dune Part 2. Okay. So, according to in this last article from Screenrant, John Spaeth, who was a screenwriter for Dune, said that Dune 2 Part 2 will set up a follow-up trilogy and possibly more sequels. So what does that mean? Well, to give you guys who are not book people an explanation, there are a lot of Dune books. Frank Herbert wrote Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, Chapter House Dune, and another one I'm forgetting right now that's between God Emperor of Dune and Heretics of Dune. Because God Emperor of Dune is book 4, and I think Heretics is book 6. So it's been a while since I read the later books. And then his son, while they were after Frank died, his son Brian was his primary heir and was cleaning out all his properties all over the place because Frank made a good living. And he found like a chest or several boxes with a lot of Frank's notes and incomplete narrative works, which mean other books on Dune, because Frank planned to continue writing Dune. He had a goal. There's a meta story to the Dune series that Frank had planned, and so his son, with the aid of another writer who people tend to rag on, Kevin. Doesn't matter. But the point is, it was perceived that Brian was doing some sort of money grab, and that he wasn't respecting his father's works. Well, so Brian published a trilogy of novels called the House Trilogy, which were prequels to Dune in the sense that they took place in a couple of years leading up to Dune. And then he published another prequel trilogy about what's called the Butlerian Jihad that took place 10,000 years before. And then he published other books, and as more and more of these books came out, and they proved to be pretty bad, they started saying, well, he's ripping off his father, he's just devaluing his father's work. And my point to this is, Herbert devalues his own work because, honestly, after Dune Messiah, the rest of the series is almost as bad as most of the prequels Brian put out. I'm not going to get into like my problems with Dune, particularly with God Emperor of Dune and later. I mean, Children of Dune could have been better, but was okay. And the House trilogy is actually better than anything that came after Dune Messiah. And you could see pretty much that it reached almost like Frank Herbert's like Bible and outline for the pre-story of Dune, and Herbert Brian and just fleshed it out in narrative and published it, and it reached pretty clearly, reached pretty well. It's pretty good. So if it were me, I'd want to see Dune Messiah adapted. Dune Messiah is almost as good as Dune. There were some flaws in the storytelling. Frankly, I thought there should have been more between Dune and Dune Messiah, but Frank just does a time skip for whatever reason. I'm not sure there's a whole trilogy worth of material in Dune Messiah. Now, if he takes Dune Messiah and some of the notes from what happened between Dune and Dune Messiah, maybe you can get a trilogy out of that. But Dune Messiah is also even denser than Dune in some respects, because it compacts all the stuff in the time skip in some flashback references and whatnot. But I think that would be a good place to end the movies, because Dune Messiah is basically the end of Paul's journey. I wouldn't mind seeing the House trilogy done, though I'd rather see it as a TV series, like maybe 2 8-episode seasons per book. And I think that would be a good way to get that information out there and tell narratively. So what I hope for in Dune Part 2 so far? Well, the main thing is this. Paul's on a journey, both internally and externally. Denis Villeneuve captured that in Part 1. Part 2 has to capture the rest of Paul's journey in Part 2, or it'll be a failure. So I don't think I can say much more at this point without spoiling the books greatly, I need more information about casting and other things that we haven't heard yet. So this is Matt from Unbearable 73. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. If you like it below, dislike if you dislike. Subscribe if you want to hear more content from me. Have a nice day, and I am out of here.